first, probably first conference organized about questions related to environment, organized by transhumanists. We will speak during about 2 hours. So speakers will be, and then there will be the opportunity, of course, for questions, but also there will be working groups. I'm very happy that we are here together for these important questions. And for this very brief introduction, I will immediately give the word to David Wood, and then after to Mark Hooks. David Wood for a general introduction about what's going on for the speakers, and Mark for this our working groups.
Thanks, Didier. So this is an unusual word, Viridian. I had to look it up, and it's a shade of green with a hint of blue. And the idea is that the Veridian future, it will involve a healthy and flourishing environment alongside healthy and flourishing individuals and a healthy and flourishing set of social relations with people. And as we know, the complication is that as we humans are using more natural resources, as our technology is becoming more powerful, we are having some good effects on the environment, but lots of bad effects as well. And some of these problems we've managed to address and solve, such as the growing hole in the ozone layer caused by CFC chemicals. We managed to reverse that. And it's the same with leaded petrol, which used to be breathed in by children, lowering their IQ and lowering their health span. Again, we managed to address that. And in both these cases, we've used politics and we've introduced some creative technology. But the remaining environmental issues are larger and in some cases seem much more difficult to solve. And we're probably going to need more sustained politics, more effective politics, and probably bringing in new technological solutions, which have their own complications. So that's broadly what the various speakers are going to be addressing. Different proposals, different analysis of the complications between the human use of technology and human social structures and the environment. And as you'll see, the speakers are coming from a variety of different perspectives. In each case, they're mainly going to use their time to speak, but audience members are encouraged to type questions into the chat, and the speakers will either address the questions straight away or possibly will come to some of them later. So that's a few words from me. Welcome everybody, and I'll hand over to Mark Roux.
Thank you very much, David. Maybe you know that almost 1 year before the AFT Technoprog released a declaration. We call it Veridian Manifesto, and the purpose was exactly what David was talking about. One of our ideas with this event today is to ask you to help us to improve this declaration. And that's the reason why at the end, after all the speakers, we had a time about 1 hour where we propose you, or we ask you to join in small groups. We will give you choices between 4 themes, and I can give you the themes. The first will be the social questions, second will be the institutional questions, the third will be the issues about energies, and the fourth about ecosystems and health. So it will be the question about trying to deepen the declaration. We will give you some links towards Google Docs, and you will be able to write directly on the text if you want suggestions, commentaries, etc., to help us to improve this text. So we will have first of all the speakers, and then I will ask you again to speak about, to think about what theme can you interest you, and we will spread in the different groups. But for now, we will start with the first speakers. So Didier, I think that you made the introduction.
Yeah, well, actually, no real introduction, just saying welcome, Indra, to speak about the hard and soft power of technology to face the crisis. And on the chat, you have the bio or some information more about Indra. Welcome, Indra.
Thank you very much. And can I just confirm that I've got until 16, GMT, that is 16:25, 15 minutes, is that correct?
Normally you have 15 minutes. It's even better if you can leave 2 minutes for questions, but if not possible, you will answer in the chat. Yes.
Okay, I'll just talk as fast as I can. So I'll just share my screen. Okay, here we go.
Good.
So that is me. I'm Indra Adnan, and I'm the co-initiator of a new political platform. Well, not so new anymore. We've been here for 4 years now, just entering into our 5th year. And I'm also a psychotherapist and a journalist. And I think the relationship between psychotherapy and journalism will become clear in this look at the hard and soft power of technology to help us face the crises that we're in. But I want to begin on a personal note, and that's not just personal to me, but personal to all of us. There is no sustainability of this planet unless we can offer sustainability for the person, for the individual. And that for us to ignore that is to invite sabotage. We started the alternative just really a week before Brexit. And the thing that triggered us into knowing we had to create a new political system was the point at which one of our MPs, Joe Cox, was murdered. And this seemed to be very much the result of a political system that was really aimed at dividing people against each other, using the tools of mental manipulation. And so that's very much the thing that we'll be looking at today. So how we see it is that in order for us to be able to face and transform the crisis that we're in, we have to always remember this as an interdependent triple crisis of human agency, shared agency, and then the impact upon the planet that we're living on. So of course, we're all familiar with the idea that our physical environment is unsustainable. But how many of us are really self-consciously trying to manage the effect that that has on our mental health? How much are we consciously creating a new narrative or a new story within which we can imagine succeeding in our endeavors to face the crisis? Not only are we collectively engaged by the growth economy that is destroying our planet, but we also are living in a very determined way within a social and mainstream media business model that takes control of our minds and wants to addict us. So if any of you are not really thinking very much about this, please consider that as human beings with emotional needs that need to get met every day, this is simply our human condition. The advertising industry, the media industry, the social media industry is geared towards meeting our emotional needs through selling a product. So that we've absolutely been constructed, we have a social construction in which we believe we're getting our emotional needs met by consuming stuff. And that's what keeps us on the hamster wheel. We never have time, we don't have space for ourselves. And if we don't have space or time, we cannot really use our imagination. So many of you, I'm sure, have recently seen the documentary, The Social Dilemma. And in The Social Dilemma, a lot of these subjects are raised, and people have learned to train their anger or train their their energies on entities like Facebook or Twitter. They're thinking that social media is the thing that has manipulated us. But I'd like to remind us all that there isn't one of us that hasn't all of our lives. There's none of us old enough here today to not have lived a complete life within the manipulation of soft power, which has created for each of us within our own countries, but also globally, a great dream within which we exist. So the Americans live within the dream of the American dream. In the UK, we live within the Great British Dream. In China, they saw how successfully that worked for bringing a country together, and they are actively creating all the time the Chinese dream. We have to be very aware of this constant construction of the mental space within which we are trying to create something quite new, which has completely different results. Unless we can depart in some way from the dream that has been constructed for us through our culture, through our media, through our values, through our education system, if we cannot objectively see that dream and try to move away from it, we won't be able to recreate something and have completely new outcomes. The good news is that we're, as well as having emotional needs, we are actually designed as human beings to have emotional capacities as well. So we have all of these great wiring systems. We are, in fact, the best technology that exists for overcoming our problems. The only thing that we lack really is the time and space to use all of this incredible technology that we have, the complex memory, the ability to imagine, the ability to observe the self, to know, and the ability to dream. All of these things make us the most incredible sophisticated piece of technology that could be imagined, in fact. So if I'm looking now at the plethora of new pieces of technology whose particular aim is to recognize us now as complex human beings who are bio-psychosocial, spiritual entities capable of doing so much, but don't have the technology or the space and the connectivity to allow that. All of these new bits of technology are trying to create that space for us. And yet at the moment, they're only being very, very superficially taken up. So the work, for example, that Dave Snowden's is doing in Wales with the Sense Maker is ways of inviting people into a relationship with an issue or a policy to see that their ideas are not simply black or white. There's no such thing really as a left response or a right response. There's always complex mixes in the potentiality for us to respond. So SenseMaker is a very interesting piece of tech that is allowing us to reflect back to ourselves that we are complex human beings. Polis is also another form of doing that. So what Polis has achieved through its use in places like Taiwan, for example, but also being used all over Europe now as a political tool for showing people themselves back to themselves, that where they might have thought there was a division between left and right, it's very rarely the truth of the matter. We are complex mixes of both left and right ideas. Zoom has obviously been a very important piece of technology over this COVID period. It has brought us not only into direct relationship with each other in a much more intense way than was ever possible before, but it has actually created quite safe places for quite intense exchanges that even people who could meet next door or could meet in the street or could have met at the pub are suddenly having for the first time in a Zoom room that they never had before. At the same time, slightly older pieces of technology that have connected us, such as WhatsApp groups, for example, have now become the new forefront and the very place that the economy and the government is trying to interfere with our connectedness. So we are almost picking up one piece of technology and escaping it to create the next one. And that's probably where Clubhouse comes in as a most recent phenomenon for people having conversations and moving into some sort of connectedness with each other. But what a strange phenomenon that is, to literally be feeling as if you're at a party where people are prepared to perhaps listen, but not listen to you. It's always a crowded space, but there's no record at all of what you said. So what can you do with that conversation? If we are successful in bringing these new bits of technology together, which really, as I say, recognize our complex selves, our need to take back our minds and to have meetings of minds, then we will again become people who are capable of not only talking about our own development, our own mental health, our own mental flourishing, but we will, without disconnect, be able to talk about our community, and in fact, be able to also have a global conversation. And I, for one, have been part of many more diverse global conversations over COVID than ever before. The most important thing that can be landed by this kind of technology is to get rid of the myth that you are either an individual or you're a social person or you're a global person, as if these are three categories. What the tech is showing us all the time is that any one of us can be personal or social or global simply by changing the bit of software that we're using. So just to go back quickly to our political platform, these are the 6 ways into the question of how do we face the crises. But I would say that probably the biggest one that is relative here, which is where soft power comes in, is how do we tell the story of all of this development and tell a new story about tech as in fact being the very space and being the very room within which we can change our own agency. And right at the heart of this is the concept of what we call cosmo-local citizens' action networks. These are containers within communities in which people can meet each other, but then meet other cans and have a much bigger shared conversation. This is part of the new political system that we are now designing. You can hear more about that if you visit our platform. But just to go back to the very early slide of how this connection of the I to the we to the world is absolutely core to our agency becoming stronger collectively. Here are some of the projects that are appearing within the alternatives new mediaverse. I'm sure most of those are familiar to you, but please do come and explore when you have the time. And that is basically me. I can't see the clock, so I have no idea whether I took 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or 15, but that's me signing out now for any questions.
Well, perfect. It was precisely the time that was asked. Thank you very much. And so now we have space for 2 questions. I see one question coming from David Wood. If human emotional capacity is, as stated, the most powerful technology, should society be putting lots more focus on helping people to develop and manage the emotional capacity?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, it's like a waking upness to the human potential. One of the most painful experiences that I see happening everywhere as this period, we've been in this 20-year revolution where the technology is basically allowing us to share information that we didn't have before. And it's happening on a number of different levels. Obviously, just the research or just the information that we can make new projects with is one thing. But how the new technology shows us back to ourselves. What Facebook has achieved in helping each one of us become the curators and the developers of our own avatar, if you like, our own public space persona, has really seriously developed us and enhanced our idea of what it means to be human in the physical space and human in the virtual space. But when you start to wake up to, when you're reading all of this information and learn, and you start to wake up to what a waste your life has been until now, how much you've been as simply a piece of machinery that has kept this growth economy going that has in fact destroyed the planet. It's that waking up process that so many people are going through now needs to be carefully held at a community level. And it's very important that even as we're learning about our emotions, we must be learning about our capacities and re-understanding ourselves as the answer to the problems that we face. If we're not learning this and we don't have the time for this, then we'll simply be swept up into another idea or another policy led by people who simply have more power and agency than we do.
Thank you, Indra. There are no questions at the moment in the chat, so but if somebody has a question, put it now, and Indra will probably answer on the chat. And now, José Luis Cordero will speak about energularity and the future of humankind. Hello, José. Don't forget to unmute yourself, maybe, José, because we don't hear you.
Yes, sorry. Yeah, I just want to talk about the energularity, which is a concept I invented when I was at Singularity University as founding faculty of energy and environmental systems almost 15 years ago. And I have been developing, but lately I have been on other transhumanist ideas, and also, as many of you know, organizing the Transvision conference. So all of you are welcome to come to Madrid in October after the pandemic to this big celebration of all exponential technologies, including environmental issues, energy issues. I work with the Millennium Project and I lead the group in Iberoamerica. And one of the main areas we cover is energy, which is actually my background. I worked many years in energy. And when we founded Singularity University, I was in charge of energy and environmental systems because they are linked. They are linked. They are not separate. All of you are familiar with the idea of the singularity, popularized by my friend Ray Kurzweil, who will be presenting his new book in Madrid in October in Transvision. His new book is called The Singularity's Nearer. So this is accelerating, as you know, and we will reach the singularity, immortality, and the energularity, all by the year 2045. Ray Kurzweil, as I said, has popularized the idea of the singularity by 2045. Aubrey de Grey, the methuselarity and longevity escape velocity, and me, the energularity or the energy singularity. Everything is changing exponentially faster, smaller, cheaper, and better. And all of you know this from many technologies like computers, for example, or even medicine, the genome sequence, which is even more exponential than Moore's law. And it is twice exponential in cost and in time. But now energy is being disrupted by exponential technologies. But many people don't see it because they think linearly. The two largest international organizations that were looking after this are linear thinkers, linear. They have been consistently wrong in their projections of renewables, wrong for not one, not two, not 5, not 10, 20 years wrong. They are linear thinkers. They don't see exponentially, but if you look at photovoltaics and renewable energies, they are truly growing exponentially. That is a logarithmic scale, and this is not stopping. This is continuing and accelerating. On the other hand, the prices are also dropping exponentially. Production increasing exponentially, prices dropping exponentially. And we have already passed what is normally called grid parity, when solar energy is cheaper than fossil fuels energy. And this is non-stoppable from now onwards. Why? Because if you look how much energy potential there is in the planet, the big elephant in the room is solar power. Solar power is bigger than anything we have on this planet now that is already produced. And my alma mater, MIT, about 10 years ago, created the first energy initiative. And it was so successful that now every person, every student at MIT has to take a course on energy. And the creator of this became Secretary of Energy of the USA under the Barack Obama administration. So energy is big, big, even in my alma mater. And all companies are moving into renewables, like British Petroleum, which now is Beyond Petroleum, because it is no longer oil and it is no longer British. Or Shell. Shell is looking at sustainable scenarios where we have a lot of solar energy, wind energy, biomass. So all of this continues, and we are going through energy waves of decarbonization. Before it was mostly coal, and before that was trees, good, a lot of carbon, but we are decarbonizing ourselves into solar energy, which eventually comes from hydrogen and no carbon. As Sheikh Ahmed Yamani said, the Stone Age did not end because of lack of stones. It ended because of a new technology. Like the same is happening to the oil age. It's ending, not because of lack of oil, because of a new technology. Also, we have the problem of climate change. And for those who still don't believe it, you can see how climate change is really happening. It really is happening. So we have to be careful about climate change. But what has happened in the last few years? Germany is leading the world with the energy transition, Energiewende in German. And in just one decade, it has been able to produce 30% of its total energy from renewables and 50% of electricity in one decade. Incredible. And other countries, even oil countries like the United Arab Emirates, are working on this. Even in Egypt, they are moving with solar power next to the pyramids. And we are also beginning to use energy better. If you look at the USA energy matrix, over half of the energy is wasted. So we are learning how not to waste energy, and that is easier than producing energy. So the internet is being created, the energy internet, from dirty energy to clean energy. And this is happening now with new companies like Tesla that is disrupting completely energy and transportation. In fact, so much that Tesla today is worth more than all car companies combined. All of them are worth less than Tesla. This says something about the future of electric vehicles. And then they have the superchargers, and they made a lot of publicity with the largest gigafactory. But that gigafactory was only the first of 5. And now the Chinese are saying they are building gigafactories much bigger than the Tesla gigafactories. The whole world is moving electrically very, very fast because prices are going down quickly, as you can see from historical examples like the Model T car from Ford, Model T, look at how it came down exponentially with production. And the same is happening with the Tesla units, exactly the same. For those who do not believe this is going to happen in 1 decade or 2 decades, look at New York. In 1900, it was all horses, except for one car, only one car. The rest were horses. Look at 13 years later. It was all cars, except for one horse. It happened in 13 years. And this is going to happen again. Look at history again of cars and horses in New York. We picked at a pig horse. We had pig horse in New York in the middle of World War II, in the middle of a pandemic. You know, the Spanish flu, remember that? Well, even with war, with flu, the transportation changed radically from horses to cars in 1 decade in the USA. The same is happening now. With telephones, as we all know, we moved from fixed telephones to mobile telephones. And the same is happening also even with taxis and Uber, shared economy, the sharing economy. This is happening in industry after industry, disruption after disruption. So how much solar energy do we need? Only 6 blocks of 100 kilometers by 100 kilometers. They could be enough to power human civilization as it is today. And we are going to have also maybe a space solar power like we do in the International Space Station. It is solar panels I visited Moscow and Nikolai Kardashev, who created the Nikolai Kardashev energy of the planet. And we are just babies. We have almost unlimited amounts of energy. Kardashev talked about 3 types of civilization. Civilization type 1, that uses the energy of the planet, civilization type 2, that uses the energy of the solar system, and civilization type 3, that uses the civilization of the galaxy. Well, we are not even type 1 civilization. We are not even 10%. We are not even 1% of type 1 civilization. We have a lot to learn, but we are learning fast. We are learning fast, and this continues. So this is what I call the energularity, the energy singularity that we will be reaching by 2045, when we become powered by solar power, reaching civilization type 1, according to Nikolai Kardashev. This is fundamental because we are going to colonize the rest of the solar system and beyond. As Neil Armstrong said in 1969, when we first landed on the moon, 1 small step for man, 1 giant leap for mankind. And we are nothing really in a nothing galaxy, in a fantastic universe. So we need to go to the moon. We need to go to Mars. This is also beginning. This is really fantastic. We live in incredible times. 3 missions to Mars last year, China, the Arab Emirates, and the USA, 2 more coming next year. The European Union, Russia, Japan, and private companies. Tesla is coming. SpaceX says that in 2023 to the moon, 2026 to Mars, faster than NASA can even dream of. And the first Martians will be humans. We will be the first Martians. We will terraform Mars, and that takes a lot of energy, But as Russian scientist Konstantin Tsiolkovsky said, the Earth is the cradle of humanity, but we cannot live forever in a cradle. So we need to evolve. We live to pass our tiny planet. We need to colonize the universe. And for that, we need energy and we need an environment. So let's light up the world. As the Chinese say, the world is beautiful, but there are sad parts like North Korea. North Korea is like a primitive country with no internet, the last country in the planet without internet to the people. And South Korea, on the other hand, has the best internet in the world. Where do we want to go? The way of the future or the way to the past? So we need to meditate. I love to meditate. Hinduism, Buddhism, we need to meditate because, as the Chinese say, there is yin and yang. There is the dark side of the force. And let me finish with this beautiful Chinese word that means crisis, because crisis has 2 characters in Chinese. The first one is danger, but the second one is opportunity. We live in the incredible time, the best opportunity. So come and join us in Madrid to celebrate the future, the next 200 years of humanity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, José. We have time for 2 questions. If the answers are short, there are 3 questions, but I will let you answer to my question in the chat. So the first question is from Indra. How much does progress depends upon political stability? And I will also read the second one directly. What do you think that growth curve of energy demand looks like?
Obviously, political stability is important for anything, but this will happen with or without political stability. Just like the transition from horses to cars happened, or the transition from fixed line to mobile lines happened, or many other of these transitions, this will happen with or without political stability. Maybe faster or slower. So maybe instead of 10 years, 15 or 20 years, but it will happen. The second question, I forgot quickly.
So the second question is, what do you think the growth curve of energy demand looks like?
Excellent point. Because actually, when we electrify, we are going to reduce energy consumption, because electric vehicles and electricity in general is much more efficient than fossil fuels, than oil. So actually, it is estimated that consumption will drop 30% once we electrify everything. So this is incredible. We will not need to produce so much once we move into electricity. And there is a comment, if the first Martians will be robots, well, they are there already. The robots are on Mars, but the humans are also going on 2026.
Okay, so I will. I said I won't, but I will still ask my question. I like your optimism, Jose, but there is one fact at the moment is we are going better for everything concerning renewable energy, but the amount of non-renewable energy used in the world is still increasing. And this is not sustainable. What's your solution to really stop that on an exponential way?
Well, as I explained, technology is improving so fast, and we consume every time less and less energy per person while we do more and more. So there is a fantastic book that David can talk about, More from Less. We will produce more with less energy. And this is happening continuously. So we need less energy. And as I said, the forecast is a decrease of 30% energy consumption once we fully electrify. So there is no collapse. And I support all of this transition also because it is economically profitable. This is profitable. Solar energy today is more profitable than petroleum. This is why it will happen, because it is good and it is profitable, and we will consume less. So don't worry about that. We don't need so much energy. We become more efficient.
Okay, thank you, Jose. The rest for the discussion also. And now the word to Nell Watson, who will speak about a quite interesting concept that that was the first time I heard about it, and I'm really very curious about this automated externality accounting. The floor is yours, Nell.
Thank you very much indeed, Didier. Our world is made up of correlations. Some of those correlations appear relatively straightforward, like one side of our face tends to mirror the other side. Most people with big hands also tend to have big feet as well. But some correlations are very complex. We might have an intuition about something, but consciously we can't quite declare why we may feel something. And yet we have that hunch that we just can't resist. Machine intelligence helps us to make sense of these kinds of tenuous correlations and connections between things, those which are present, but that we ourselves find difficult to describe or to put into words. In essence, machine intelligence today enables us to make sense out of chaos and to automate the ineffable, those things that we cannot easily put into words or describe, but sometimes we know them when we see them. We have descended through supervised learning and deep learning, and now into more esoteric forms of machine learning, such as meta-learning. This is a step forward towards a more generalizable form of machine intelligence. Meta-learning agents can compete with each other in order to save themselves or to figure out how to break into something and get access to something that they otherwise couldn't, sometimes even by exploiting the rules of engines or exploiting aspects of physics. And across several iterations, these agents can then learn to, in this case, steal the ramp first before the Reds can use it. And from this method of learning, they can perform extremely complex and extremely sophisticated ways of optimizing for the world, or ensuring that an outcome happens or does not happen. Recently, we've seen the release of new technologies such as GPT-3, which are phenomenally capable at transforming text in new ways that haven't been possible before. These kinds of algorithms can turn natural language directly into code that you can then edit yourself or immediately deploy in live environments. These technologies can then translate text into pictures, so you can describe an object and see it breathed into existence. Now, these transformer-based technologies will very soon be able to solve all kinds of problems that seemed purely the domain of human intelligence until very recently. And the reason for this is that the secret is out that having colossal sized models gives a disproportionate return on investment. At the same time, whilst these gigantic models are being made, the cost of creating and deploying machine intelligence has absolutely precipitated. And so now we can democratize these technologies to more people. Machine intelligence is starting to get very personal. It's starting to get local. And today, your machine intelligence agents that you have in your kitchen or in your pocket are able to talk to each other for the first time. And now all kinds of different smart and formerly non-smart devices are being able to become smart, being able to join these networks of things. We can plug in a little sensor like this and start to understand the world in new ways, to understand whenever the pot is about to boil over or when a light has been left on. We can use these kinds of technologies to listen to machines for preventive maintenance, to understand when something might be about to go wrong before it does. But traditionally, there have been limits. IoT has relied upon batteries. It's relied upon expensive electronics, and that's changing. Now we have IoT systems which can be powered purely by ambient electromagnetic radiation. Their antennas can take in some passing radio frequency waves and use that to power themselves. Here in another example, we have a mechanical system.
Technical aspect, Nell, sorry. At the moment, we see only one not moving image since about 2 minutes. I don't know if there is a technical thing or is this?
Okay.
Yeah, no, it's okay again.
Okay,
no, it's okay.
Okay, okay. So now we have technologies which can, as a ratchet turns, two little pieces of metal touch each other. And that actuation can be detected through backscattering of wireless radiation. And this means that you can understand when a pill bottle has been opened, or how many times, or perhaps how much fluid has passed through a bottle, without needing batteries, without needing circuit boards. And so everything can be connected to the cloud in wireless ways without any expense, without any maintenance, etc. This is a real game changer in the Internet of Things. But there are some potential downsides in terms of security. There have been a lot of scandals reported recently where IoT devices get owned and turned against those who have previously enjoyed them. If we are to enjoy the benefits of machine intelligence and IoT, we need to weave good security and good cryptographic techniques into them. Today, the latest machine intelligence systems operate on a principle of tokenization. The parameters that they are working with and the data that the input and output is tokenized. And in fact, this is kind of a parallel evolution with many cryptocurrency systems as well. And so presently we're starting to see a convergence between the worlds of crypto, AI, and IoT. And they are going to be much mutually enhanced by this coming together. We're entering a world now where we can perform very complex functions in a decentralized way, a way which is very fast and which is provably, formally, logically, cryptographically secure. And it has been observed that when civilizations figure out how to do complex things in an effortless way, that they tend to advance in ways which were not previously possible. And I think that these technologies are giving us new ways to manage our planet and manage our footprint upon it. We've mastered the art of production. In fact, about 160,000 plastic bags are created on this planet every second. We have a plastic bag maximizer, essentially. We ourselves are the gray goo eating the planet and turning it into plastic bags. We need to master not only production, but also consumption, also the end of life for our production once we're done with these things. Our economy today is about some people in the planet enjoying incredible luxury, but at the cost, a shifted cost, of somebody else having to pay for that enjoyment. Somebody else may be very far away. They may be human, they may be non-human. Those costs fundamentally need to be paid by someone. We think of capital in terms of finance, yes, but we tend to think less often about capital in terms of natural or environmental capital and social capital, the well-being and enjoyment of human beings and other non-human animals. Essentially, our modern economy privatizes benefits and externalizes costs onto others. And this is accepted. It's accepted as being how things are, because until this point in history, we haven't had an effective way of managing those shifted costs, those externalities in economics terms. And finally, that may be beginning to change. Today, the Google Street View car, which comes through your neighborhoods, doesn't just have cameras on it. It's also sniffing the air. It's figuring out what kinds of chemicals and particulates are in there. And this network, this fleet of cars, was able to figure out that one industry in the US making ammonium nitrate fertilizer, that one industry was creating 3 times more methane than all other industry in the US combined. And we had no idea. We didn't know this. And methane is dozens of times more contributory towards climate change than CO2, at least in the shorter term. Finally, we do know. We can collect this information. We can aggregate it in new ways so that we can understand it and share that understanding. And once we've understood who's doing what and who's being affected, we can begin to enable redress. Technologies like Do Not Pay provide a wizard-like interface for, yes, defending against a parking ticket, but also for joining a class action lawsuit. These provide new ways of getting access to justice for everyone, which didn't exist before. And when we put all of these elements together, we come to a near future of a smart, self-aware, living Internet of Planet, one which is capable of automated detection, accountability, and redress for these externalities, a concept that I describe as automated externality accounting. I've made a little website at pacha.org, pacha.org, where you can look at some of the initiatives today all around the world who are doing work in this direction towards this concept. I believe this is going to change our future. It's going to enable us to have our cake and eat it too, to enjoy the benefits of free market capitalism, but without destroying the world and ourselves in the process. If we can master this art of understanding shifted costs in new ways, we can make so much of a difference to human well-being, to managing pollution in new ways, to enabling greater justice in society, and as well, ensuring that we can find new ways of essentially paying people to do the right thing, of aligning incentives in ways which previously weren't possible to create a world which is fairer, more just, and more sustainable for all. I invite you all to chew on this during this fantastic conference, and thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Nell, for this quite interesting speech. Also, by the way, thank you for you and for all participants, speakers, for respecting the time slot. And now we have time for one question coming from David. So David is asking, how will cost of externalities be included in prices paid in the market? Taxes at local or national, or I would add or international levels?
Well, externalities are often priced in through taxes, or perhaps through a Pigouvian tax by states. But that's typically rather clumsy. Only the most egregious and gross of externalities tend to get noticed and policed. And of course, there's an issue of corruption as well. But I think we can do this through tort, through civil courts, right? The evidence, the standard of evidence for a civil tort is not terribly high. And so if we can triangulate a reasonable probability, then I think a lot of these issues can be solved in a civil manner using existing court infrastructure, but amplified through machine intelligence and streamlined through initiatives like Do Not Pay.
Thank you, Nell. In a way, you answer also the comment question of James, forcing firms to take responsibility for externalities requires laws and regulations. No, but yeah, you spoke about in a way. Okay, now the last speaker before the pause is Alexander Fraxos, who will speak about the future of biomethane is in our hands. Welcome, Alexander. The floor is yours. Don't forget to unmute yourself, of course.
Hi, hello. Is everything looks good?
Yes, hello, you can start.
Good afternoon, and I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about the future of biomethane. It's time to take climate action to the next level. Only if we combine conventional approaches to climate mitigation with CO2 removals, the world might have a real chance of preserving our natural environment. In 10 years, we have to be capable of removing several gigatons of CO2 equivalent emissions, and in 30 years, tens of gigatons. Just to fully grasp the magnitude of scale, 1 gigaton is almost 2 times heavier than the total mass of the human population. Currently, there is a great deal of R&D on negative emission technologies. Nets take more CO2 out of the atmosphere than they put in. A widely discussed example is bioenergy with carbon capture and storage, also known as BECCS. In its most traditional form, BECCS relies on a supply of woody biomass that is combusted in coal-fired power plants. The CO2 in the exhaust gas is captured and stored underground. BECCS is a technology that oftentimes put forward despite limited feedstock supplies, complex logistics, coal phase-outs, and energy-consuming CO2 storage. In order for BECCS to realize its full potential, a virtually limitless feedstock, a technically scalable process, and CO2 utilization is needed. By switching the source of biomass from wood to seaweed and anaerobically digesting it to produce biogas is a great way of hitting two birds with one stone. Seaweed can provide immense supplies of feedstock, and anaerobic digestion is a highly scalable and climate-friendly process. In the biogas upgrading process, CO2 is separated from methane to produce a higher quality gas called biomethane. In a Sabatier reaction, the separated CO2 can be combined with clean hydrogen produced via renewably powered electrolyzers to yield additional renewable natural gas. Therefore, bioenergy with carbon capture and storage is transformed into bioenergy with carbon capture, utilization, and storage, fueled by microalgae with seawide growth potential. By applying Industry 4.0 technologies such as the Internet of Things, robotics, artificial intelligence, and genetic engineering to seaweed cultivation and harvest systems, a largely automated and highly reliable seaweed farm could be built to both reduce costs and the risks of global warming. Large-scale industrial seaweed cultivation will enhance water quality by feeding on nutrients and CO2, hence mitigating coastal acidification. On a yearly basis, a seaweed farm the size of the Netherlands could provide enough proteins for the entire European population, and a seaweed farm the size of the United Kingdom could suck more than 2 gigatons of CO2 from the atmosphere. Imagine what's possible. Pyrolysis is a process of chemically decomposing organic materials at elevated temperatures in the absence of oxygen. The word pyrolysis is coined from the Greek words pyro, which means fire, and lysis, which means separating. Biomethane pyrolysis is a breakthrough energy positive technology with a carbon negative footprint. The pyrolysis of biomethane is a key step in the bioenergy with carbon capture, utilization, and storage process. Instead of burning the biomethane, capturing and storing the CO2 underground, biomethane is being pyrolyzed to yield hydrogen and highly valued carbon nanotubes. In other words, the C atom in biomethane is being converted from a liability into an asset. Today, hydrogen is enjoying such a remarkable momentum. The world shouldn't miss this unique opportunity to make hydrogen a significant part of our sustainable and secure energy future. As an example, hydrogen can play a key role in achieving the objectives of the European Green Deal and Europe's clean energy transition. Hydrogen has a myriad of energy and non-energy uses, such as storing renewable energy, generating electricity, fueling heavy transport, and providing energy and feedstock. to energy-intensive industries. And most importantly, hydrogen offers a solution to decarbonize industrial processes and economic sectors, where reducing emissions is both urgent and hard to achieve. Furthermore, hydrogen is a clean energy carrier that can be seasonally stored and transported cost-effectively over long distances via the existing natural gas infrastructure. It is worthwhile to mention that a gas grid is much more cost-effective than an electrical grid. For the same investment, a gas pipe can transport 10 to 20 times more energy than an electrical cable. So, international cooperation is vital to accelerate the growth of clean and flexible hydrogen around the world. Recent research and technological advances have established a promising pathway for a class of high-grade solid carbons, namely carbon nanotubes. Carbon nanotubes are cylinders of one or more layers of graphene. Graphene is a special form of graphite that is 100 carbon and only one layer thick. The unique nature of carbon endows CNTs with extraordinary material properties, such as very high thermal and electrical conductivity, stiffness, strength, and toughness. Carbon nanotubes have been recognized as a wonder material that could revolutionize, among many others, aerospace, automotive parts, sports equipment, and building materials. Public-private partnerships, inclusive research and innovation, and technoprogressive decision-making are all key pillars to make carbon nanotubes the materials of the future. The current crisis has shown that new paradigms are necessary to drive the global economy forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexander. Thank you for this speech about the roads leading to hydrogen. I will take a look to see if there are questions at the moment. Yes, there is one from David Wood. What is the single biggest obstacle to scaling up the use of hydrogen as you describe? And I will also read the question from Cyril. I'm wondering if some study already estimated the optimal level of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, because if we are really successful to decarbonate, I'm wondering if we may trigger a snowball effect, a real one, with too low greenhouse gases to keep the atmosphere warm enough.
Okay, so the main obstacles for that technology to be commercialized are how we can remove the carbon that is attached to the catalyst in the process of biomethane pyrolysis. Though the cost of producing hydrogen is much cheaper than doing it with electrolyzers. So that could be quite advantage for that technology and open up the doors for widely hydrogen commercialization. And then The other question was about greenhouse gases, that something about a snowball effect.
Yes, in short, if we can lower enough the level of greenhouse gases, it could be also too much. Yeah, so do you know about study to estimate the optimal level of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere?
Mm-hmm. So the optimal level would be net zero greenhouse gas emissions before the switch of the next century. Because we do know that if we remove now, for example, all the greenhouse gases, the atmosphere is a little bit slow to adapt to those changes. So I would say around 2000, between 2070 and 2090 would be a very good estimate and window that we have to become net zero.
Okay. Thank you, Alexander, again. If there are other questions, I propose that you answer in the chat. And now we have we stop for about 10 minutes. Well, we stop for 10 minutes. And Marion will show you 2 episodes of the Symphony of Science, something already from a while ago, but I like it very much. So you can go for a coffee, or you can enjoy the 2 videos, the 2 YouTube videos. Okay. We don't have, Marion, we don't have sound at the moment.
No?
No.
It's working?
Not at the moment.
Oh, fuck.
When you share the screen, you've got to pick the option to share the sound.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
So
we were testing this morning and it was working. Of course, when we are not anymore testing, there are of course problems, you know, especially for people positive for technology. Yeah, it's almost logical.
Ah, yes, I found it. I think so. And right now?
Yes.
All life is related, and it enables us to construct with confidence the complex tree that represents the history of life. Our planet, the Earth, is, as far as we know, unique in the universe. It contains life. Here, plants and animals proliferate in such numbers that we still have not even named all the different species. Darwin's great insight revolutionized the way in which we see the world. We now understand why there are so many different species.
Every cell is a triumph of natural selection, and we're made of trillions of cells. Within us is a little universe. Those are some of the things that molecules do. Given 4 billion years of evolution, we are, each of us, a multitude.
Now, how did the molecules of life arise?
It began in the sea some 3,000 million years ago. Complex chemical molecules began to clump together.
These were the seeds from which the tree of life developed. They were able to split, replicating themselves as bacteria do.
The secrets of evolution are time and death. There's an unbroken thread that stretches from those first cells to us. The secrets of evolution are time and death. There's an unbroken thread that stretches from those first cells to us. Every cell is a triumph of natural selection, and we're made of trillions of cells. In us is a little universe. Those are some of the things that molecules do. Given 4 billion years of evolution, we are, each of us, a multitude.
There isn't a sharp line dividing humans from the rest of the animal kingdom. It's a very wuzzy line. It's a very wuzzy line. It's getting wuzzier all the time. We find animals doing things that we, in our arrogance, used to think was just human. It's a very wuzzy line, it's getting wuzzier all the time.
Every cell is a triumph of natural selection, and we're made of trillions of cells. In us is a little universe. Those are some of the things that molecules do. Given 4 billion years of evolution, we are, each of us, a multitude. Every cell is a triumph of natural selection, and we're made of trillions of cells. In us is a little universe.
Our planet, the Earth, is, as far as we know, unique in the universe. It contains life. Its continued survival now rests in our hands.
We're all connected to each other biologically, to the earth chemically, to the rest of the universe atomically.
I think nature's imagination is so much greater than man's. He's never gonna let us relax.
We live in an in-between universe where things change all right, but according to patterns, rules, or as we call them, laws of nature.
I'm this guy standing on a planet. Really, I'm just a speck. Compared with a star. The planet is just another speck. To think about all of this, to think about the vast emptiness of space. Billions and billions of stars, billions and billions of specks.
The beauty of a living thing is not the atoms that go into it, but the way those atoms are put together. The cosmos is also within us. We're made of star stuff. We are a way of the cosmos to know itself. Across the sea of space, the stars are other suns. We've traveled this way before, and there is much to be learned.
We're all connected to each other biologically, to the earth chemically, to the rest of the universe atomically.
I find it elevating and exhilarating to discover that we live in a universe which permits the evolution of molecular machines as intricate and subtle as we.
I know that the molecules in my body are traceable to phenomena in the cosmos. That makes me want to grab people in the street and say, have you heard this?
The beauty of a living thing is not the atoms that go into it, but the way those atoms are put together. The cosmos is also within us. We're made of star stuff. We are a way of the cosmos to know itself.
There's this tremendous mass of waves all over in space, which is the light bouncing around the room, going from one thing to the other, and it's all really there, really there. But you gotta stop and think about it, about the complexity to really get the pleasure. It's all really about all of this, to think about the vast emptiness of space. Billions and billions of stars, billions and billions of specks.
The beauty of a living thing is not the atoms that go into it, but the way those atoms are put together. The cosmos is also within us. We're made of star stuff. We are a way of the cosmos to know itself.
Across the sea of space, the stars are other suns. We have traveled this way before, and there is much to be learned.
Welcome back, everybody. Thanks so much for everybody returning. That was fascinating. We are all star stuff, as you heard. So we're about to start with the next set of speakers. I want to express some admiration for Didier and the speakers in the first group for all sticking to time. I'm sure the speakers in this next group will equally stick to time, but will be fascinating too. So let's welcome James Hughes, the Executive Director of the International Institute for Ethics and Emerging Technology.
Hello, friends. So I want to do a brief review of how I got here. 35 years ago, I started this journal, Eco-Socialist Review, which I was a student socialist activist and had been very taken with the ideas of the German Greens. The American Green Party had gotten started. And I wanted to make an intervention into the debates about what a politics would look like that was consistent with both green politics and left-wing social justice. I have never been a communist. I'm an anti-communist. But it was clear that both communist states and social democratic states had fallen off the rails, had not done what was necessary to protect ecological sustainability. Nonetheless, the opinion of the eco-socialists was that socialist policies were a necessary prerequisite for us getting to ecological sustainability, that they needed to take into account the interests and the economic security and prosperity of the majority of people who would have to enact these policies. Now, when I stopped publishing Eco-Socialist Review in 1994, I got deeply involved in biopolitical questions, eventually becoming executive director of Humanity Plus, which was then called World Transhumanist Association, and that led to the founding of the IET and the beginning of a conversation about what the politics are in that corner of the ideological world that we were in, at the intersection of progressive political values and transhumanist thinking. We began to call that position technoprogressivism, and a number of people have taken up the term technoprogressivism. There's an enormous amount of variety in terms of the people who identify or use the term technoprogressivism, all the way from social liberalism to new forms of communism or technocracy, and a variety of opinions about the kinds of technologies that should be focused on in this domain. However, at the 2014 Paris Transition, we articulated a techno-progressive declaration that outlined a number of steps that we should be taking towards developing the techno-progressive point of view in a number of different social movements, a number of different domains, as a consistent political point of view. Now, I want to review why I think eco-socialism frames, importantly, elements of the techno-progressive vision in regards to ecology. One part that eco-socialists and I think most techno-progressives would share is the idea that any kind of pastoral romanticism about our ancestors is misplaced, that hunters and gatherers and farmers, agricultural civilizations were not in fact green, that there's substantial evidence that they had mega effects on their environment, the elimination of large animals from North America and Australia as humans began to filter into those environments, examples of hunter-gatherer, despoilation, and agricultural civilizations similarly were only limited by their scale, not by their attention to ecological details. So capitalism alone cannot explain our ecological destruction, although it probably exacerbates it. I think we both share, eco-socialists and the techno-progressives in general, share the idea that there are some preconditions for what it takes to have an ecologically sustainable civilization. One is contemporary science. We have to understand, we have to have the tools and the models to understand what we're doing and what the effects of it are going to be, to take an active managerial interest in this environment that we're shaping. And we have to be able to come up with technological alternatives if we see that the things that we're doing aren't going in the right direction. Now, I'm also a social democrat, so I will emphasize the importance of civil liberties as well as economic and political equality in moving us towards the kind of ecological policies that we need. We need to have a regulatory state that is not simply driven by the same industrial prerogatives. We need to have independent citizen movements that put pressure on the state. And you can see the failure of that in state capitalist regimes or communist regimes that have pursued disastrous environmental policies because they do not allow a space for an independent environmental critique in their societies. I think we also share the perspective that population itself is not a problem, that the concerns about overpopulation have a Malthusian, an incorrect Malthusian history, and that they are usually directed at the fertility of the poor and not in fact the fertility of rich white guys like myself who happen to consume 10 times, 100 times as many resources as the poor folks around the world. And that the best way, if you're concerned about fertility, is to educate women. And if you educate women, their fertility drops, as has been precipitously happening around the world, so that fertility, in fact, will probably drop so far that the majority of the world will begin to shrink by about 2050. Therefore, overpopulation, at least in the absence of some radical new anti-aging technology, which we may get to, is not an issue that we need to address. Now, where eco-socialists and techno-progressives begin to have distinct perspectives is what is the role, how do we achieve ecological protection under democratic capitalism? Democratic capitalism is a system in which the profitability of the private sector underwrites the fiscal capacities of the state. All politicians have to address this. All politicians under democratic capitalism are also subject to the political discipline of capital, either by direct campaign contributions, by their influence through think tanks and other political agencies. And so as long as we allow mega profits to be made by sectors of the economy like big oil, big carbon, that allow for that distortion of the political process, even if a majority says that we need to move away from carbon towards an ecologically sustainable future, that will be distorted by these corporate impacts. And so this is an argument for why we need to take away their wealth and power and have citizen movements and political parties that are independent of those pressures. Also at the international level, international competition, capitalist competition makes it very difficult for countries to shift to ecological policies because they tend to increase costs and reduce profitability. And this is especially true for the path to industrialization that state capitalist regimes like Russia and China have pursued. They basically for 100 years have put the communist parties in place of capitalists to frog march their societies into industrialization, environmental consequences be damned, and if you make an environmental complaint, you get sent to the gulag. So that didn't work very well, and it was largely because they were in a competition, a global capitalist competition with Western technology. So the eco-socialists would argue that we need to advance. If we want to sell these policies, one of the things that under democratic capitalism, it's very difficult to convince working class populations that these kinds of ecological visions are going to be attractive for them. And so as a consequence, we need to propose a package of social transition policies that will convince working class people, the democratic majorities, that these policies will be in their interest, not only because they preserve the planet, but also because they are an attractive future in their own right. They will provide all the goods, the economic security, and the kinds of jobs and so forth that people want. This has been the project of efforts to build green labor coalitions, to meld red and green politics, to create an environmental justice movement. And it has resulted today in many countries in the concept of a Green New Deal, an omnibus piece of legislation or an omnibus approach to legislation, which merges all the massive infrastructure investments that we need and the kinds of trillions of dollars of energy upgrade and housing upgrades and so forth that we need with the creation of new green jobs, the guarantee of jobs, the guarantee of healthcare, the guarantee of retirement security, all of which will convince hopefully coal miners and loggers and all the people invested in the old ways of doing things that this new society will be a good one for them and their children. Now, parallel to the eco-socialist movement developing over the last 35 years, there has also been a movement of explicit folks arguing from a green perspective for high technologies and various kinds of technologies, some of which veer over into techno fixes and some of which are not techno fixes, but I'll get to that in a second. I think one of the most important contributions was Stuart Brand's book, Whole Earth Discipline. He argues explicitly, as it says on the cover, cities are better than sprawl. People in cities use fewer resources and destroy less of the environment than sprawling populations. Nuclear power and GMOs will be necessary for a sustainable transition, both in terms of ensuring food security in the case of GMOs, but also ensuring energy sufficiency in terms of nuclear power. And that geoengineering should at least be explored and perhaps implemented, maybe inescapable. These are all, of course, incredibly controversial positions, and there were many environmentalists who either ignored or immediately disabused Stuart Brand of his notions. But eventually, a group around the Breakthrough Institute formed Brand and others into a grouping, and they signed the Eco-Modernist Manifesto. And eco-modernism endorsed many of these core ideas that the goal is to decouple the growth of human prosperity and the growth of economies from economic impacts, to intensify human technological activity in a way that would eventually allow us to have a high-tech, prosperous, high-growing economy, and not despoil or start reversing the despoilation of nature. And that includes urban density and nuclear power, GMOs, and geoengineering. Of course, these folks also got a lot of pushback, and they've had very little impact, I would argue, on environmental thinking because of their controversiality. However, there are people arguing at the intersection of these ideas. There are people like Peter Fraze, which I'll talk about in a second, Matt Huber, Lee Phillips, and organizations around the world who are open to and who are, in the first place, they're critical of the Luddism of much of the environmental movement, open to the possibility that emerging technologies are part of the solution for sustainability, but who also have a systemic critique, a systemic political understanding of why we got where we got and what it would take to move to where we need to be. And that's missing in a lot of these eco-modernist presentations. They say, oh, wouldn't it be great if we had this new technology? Well, yes, except that corporations don't see it as profitable. People don't want to adopt it. How do we get there if we don't massively change the political economy? That's the question that we face. So my proposal is that the Technoprogressive project is to identify what we see as a 250-year-old tradition from the liberal and egalitarian parts of the Enlightenment thought that we can find in many different movements that are open to science, technology, and reason as being part of the solution, an inescapable complement of the solution to the problems that we face, but also recognizes that we need a more just and a more liberal future in order to achieve those solutions. The people at the intersection of this are these socialist eco-modernists, socialists eco-socialists who have adopted or who argue for various kinds of technologies that are considered verboten in the rest of the ecological movement. So those include people like Lee Phillips, whose book, Austerity Ecology, Collapse Porn Addicts, put the finger solely on, if you keep arguing that a green future is going to be one where you don't have social media, you don't have the internet, you don't have more electricity, you don't have space travel, you don't have flying rocket backpacks, then we're never going to get there because no one wants to live in that future. The people who want to live in a future that's high tech and a growing economy. We have to figure out how to make that compatible with the ecological vision. Parallel to that, there are the folks arguing that capitalism itself, the kind of accelerationist argument, capitalism itself is giving birth to post-capitalism. It's going to eliminate jobs. It's going to transition us from whatever kind of capitalism we're in now to something new. These folks also have ecological visions, and there's an overlap between these two groups, which I can't go into now. But basically, the idea that high technology could be part of the solution, which is also problematic in certain forms of left-wing thought, is here applied to an accelerationist vision. Now, I want to point especially to Peter Frase's book, For Futures, because I think the methodology, it's both very accommodating for technoprogressives who tend to like science fiction and futurist scenario building, but his methodology is a very useful one for us to think about. What if we decouple the arguments of historical inevitability here, what if we achieved some combination of scarcity or abundance and equality or hierarchy in our future? What kinds of societies would that generate? His argument is that a society that pursues current trends and has abundance but maintains existing social hierarchies and inequalities would end up exploiting people through rent on intellectual property. I won't go into the argument here, but if you're familiar with the post-capitalist arguments, just because everybody has a magic nano printer that can make all their stuff doesn't mean they own the intellectual property rights to the patents on the magic nano things that they're producing. Exterminism is inequality plus scarcity. That means we lock down the borders, we start shooting people on sight. If you lose your job in this future economy or you're not in a gated community, tough luck for you, et cetera, et cetera. Equality under scarcity conditions means making sure that everyone has an equal amount of limited stuff. And equality under abundance conditions means we have all kinds of possibilities for organizing ourselves politically and economically. He calls it communism. So, in review of the Veridian Manifesto, and I'm looking forward to the conversation with this afternoon, I think
so. One more minute, James.
One more minute. Okay, good. I'm right at the end. In review, I think the Veridian Manifesto represents a number of political compromises. It could definitely use more eco-modernism. It takes a pass on GMOs. It endorses carbon capture, but it's pretty cautious about nuclear power. It's cautious about geoengineering. I think it could also use a substantial dose of eco-socialism, an understanding of how we got here, what the constraints are moving forward in terms of social and economic policy. So again, just in conclusion, I see our role as promoting an attractive, plausible, equal, and sustainable future that takes account of emerging technologies and pursuing arguments against right-wing futurism that tends to promote techno fixes or libertarian free market solutions, and against the kinds of Luddism in the left and environmental movements, to coalesce these kinds of thinkers across different movements into a coherent techno-progressive worldview. And I see the Veridian Manifesto as an important step in this direction, but one that could use some work. Thanks so much.
I'll just feed in one question very quickly from Dean Bubley, who suggests that the ideas of changing the system have been around for 100 years and haven't gone anywhere. And maybe it's better to figure out which techno fixes are working and get on with them. And the ideas of changing the system are just a pie in the sky. Do you have a quick response to that?
Well, I don't know why you would look at the last 100 years and say that changing the system is pie in the sky. I mean, Europeans enjoy universal healthcare. Americans do not. We pay 50 to 100% more for healthcare than you do. There are clear examples of public policy that are adopted under social democracy that are not adopted under free market regimes. that make enormous consequences. I mean, and the environmental legislation that's been adopted since the 1960s in the United States has made a substantial impact on the cleanliness and the breathability of our air and the cleanliness of our water. Carbon capture schemes, they may not be go far enough, but they are a substantial improvement. The investment of the Chinese state, although it has a lot of problems and there's a lot of hype, the capacity of the Chinese state to set an ecological course and make the necessary public policy to get us there is an example that state policy can be incredibly effective in changing to an ecologically sustainable direction. I don't understand why anyone would look at the history of the last 100 years and say social change is irrelevant. Let's just try to invent our way out of the problem.
So I've been a bit unfair to Dean's question, but let's continue that particular line of discussion in the chat. And maybe afterwards, it is time, thanks very much, James. It is time to move on to the next speaker, who is the Executive Director of Humanity Plus and recognized as the co-founder of modern transhumanism, Natasha Vitamore. Natasha, over to you. I have to unmute.
Good. Can everyone hear me now?
Great.
Great. Okay. Thank you, David. And thank you, Didier and Mark and the team at Viridian for putting this event together. I'm going to take a different approach. For me, the ecology and life is all about cooperation and a synergistic approach to that. And that's why I love the term green of Viridian in that regard. I don't think it's a political issue. I don't think it's an economic issue. I think it's a humanity issue of understanding the need to do what we can do on a daily basis to practice ecology and the Veridian Declaration. I don't see it as an intellectual approach. I don't see it as something that is a point counterpoint. We're all in this together, and I don't even like that phrase. I'm so tired of it, frankly. But that is the truth, that we live on the same planet here. And we have a lifespan that is precious to us. And we cooperate with other life forms on a moment-to-moment, nanosecond to nanosecond basis. And unless we can agree on that, we can't agree on anything. So it doesn't matter if you're left, right, up or down, socialist, capitalist, communist, Marxist. I don't give a fuck, basically. And I'm going to say that loud and clear because I think that is taking us down the wrong road. I think it is pitting us against each other rather than finding solutions to the problem. The problem is we've got, number one, in the world, not just in the United States, in the world, the population of elderly people is growing in magnitude. And this is a very serious issue. People over 60 turning 65 are in the United States, 10,000 a day. And that's just a portion of the people in the world that are turning over 60, over 65, wherever you want to put your middle age spectrum on a chronological basis. That is an issue. And if Japan is trending as far as the older population of people retiring early, and the decline in birth rate, there is an issue that is beyond politics. It's about the ecology. It's about the give and take and the distribution of products and people who need products. So then we get to more the architecture of the stratagem, which would borrow back into Buckminster Fuller, which was not political, was not ideological, was not anything other than looking architecturally at what works and what doesn't work. And I think that is the best mindset that we can have today in addressing this. If 65 people are turning, if the 10,000 are turning 65 a day, that's an issue. And if people are retiring earlier, that's an issue. So then we get into what is the real meaning of life? And for this solidarity of ecology, the meaning of life is you, your purposefulness, how much you enjoy life, how long you want to live, how well you want to live. And that is not about money. That is about your own self-worth. It's what you can do with yourself with as much or as little as you have to find a level of compassion and happiness within that. So while the aging population is indeed growing and we have an issue about retirement and how to take care of people who are retiring, we also need to, at the same time, through a Viridian perspective, find employment, work for these people to re-educate, to retrain, so they do have a sense of the environment. Now, on a personal note, I was forced into retirement when I turned 70, and it was a shock to my system, and it was very depressing for me. I couldn't imagine not having a job. I'd worked since I was 18, starting businesses, owning businesses. I've never borrowed money from anyone my entire life. I've never taken a handout. Even when I needed it, I'd work 3 jobs at once just to get by, to pay for myself, because that's my particular moral belief system. But other people have it differently, and that's to be respected too. So we need to find out ways that people who are forced into retirement or have to retirement because of ill health can have a sense of purposefulness, that they're doing something. So I think that it's education is the core factor there, and how to bring people back into the workforce. And again, I think Japan is kind of our blueprint trending country that is setting an example of what they're doing and how they're doing it. Another consequence here that deals with the issue of population is the birth decline. Birth rates are declining in many countries around the world as people are getting older. So this, to me, is a core issue for the Veridian Declaration and the Veridian mindset. How are we going to address this? The technologists, as Noel Watson was saying, are coming up with artificial intelligence, robotics, automation, machine learning, different ways to approach that. But that's not for everyone. Let's stay in our lane of expertise and figure out what we can do to collaboratively and conjointly work together on this issue, rather than causing divisiveness or blaming other people for the problem. It doesn't matter who caused the problem is here. So I say, let's find solutions. Checking my time. David, give me a time check, please. I think I have.
You are doing fine. You've got about 9 minutes left.
Good. I just want to be respectful of everyone's time here. So those are my key points in finding a solidarity in the issue of the environment and what we can do to bring about better energy sources. We really don't know what they are. Photovoltaic cells are extremely expensive. Why is that? I'm not sure I know. It's not my area of expertise, but I do understand that economics is one of the most important areas for us to focus on, not politics. And if we look at economics through the lens of a diverse spectrum of thinkers, again, diverse spectrum of thinkers that all have something to offer from the various levels of knowledge and expertise, I would highly recommend reading Max Border's book on the collapse. It's a very interesting book. It doesn't take any one political position, but addresses the issues more, I think, through the lens of objectivity with an incredible sense of humor. So that's how I see it. I see it as being beyond politics, beyond being hegemony, beyond being beyond fields, but doing something on a daily basis, each of us picking up someone else's trash, just throw it away. Don't get all Karen on anyone. Don't go yelling, oh, they did it, they're to blame. Just do whatever we can on a daily basis to help. And I'm going to close out with a short video I made many years ago. I was talking to Didier about this. I started working with the environment in the 1970s when I created, I went to the Amazon jungle in 1973, and I did a performance piece there as a Fluxus art piece with the natives in the jungle. I don't have any recordations of it because it was before, we just didn't do it back then. It was anti-Andy Warhol. But I was in the jungle. I went into the Amazon jungle up the Black River, and I settled in an area of a tribe of natives there. And it was charming and delightful. And I looked over the cusp of the trees, and I saw the first factory in the Amazon jungle. Again, this is in the early 1970s. That inspired me to do other works, Red Rocks Amphitheater, many of you know about, breaking away from the constraints of dogma, Haleakala, Waking Goddess, Sleeping Goddess, Waking Muse, about the dormant volcano after I lost my baby. And I did a performance in that volcano. It is on 16mm film. That volcano is no longer dormant, and it is undergoing some ecological problems with its environment and its life forms there that I'm very concerned about. In Austin, Texas, I worked with the Greens there and the environmentalists in Austin, looking at the beauty of the landscape in Austin, which is largely limestone. Exquisite environment that is undergoing some very serious issues now that Austin has become one of the hot spots in the world to live. There's not enough energy there to sustain that environment. Other projects indeed, but I've always approached the environment as a beautiful theatrical space with the sunset and the sunrise and the ocean and the waves and the beauty of it. And it saddens me deeply to see that being destroyed by pollution. So my issue is not so much energy, because it's not my area of expertise, but it's about the mess and the gluttony and the absurdity of it all. And with that, thank you very much. And I'll close my film and I will share the screen here. It's just a very short piece, so I hope you enjoy it. I'm going to, well, I better start it first before I share screen, because then I can't do it. Start from the beginning. Oh, no, I can't do that either. So I'll share screen and share, and I'll start the video right here. Before I do that, I'm gonna turn the volume way up. Okay, so forgive me here. Okay, there, from beginning.
There's no sound coming through, Natasha. You may have to. Ah.
Quantum physics bypass the concept of the world as sitting out there. The universe will never be the same. On the beach, experiences came to life, cascades of energy from outer space, particles created and destroyed in this dance. Hermann Hesse recalled a dream. He heard two distinct voices. The first told to calm. The second voice, like a primal cause. Suffering only hurts because you fear it. Conflict, pain, paradox. Transformations trying to happen. Deep within you, there is only one, a single power, and that is called loving. Every hour, bags of encouraging account for unthirdable garbage in our landfills. Americans produce 154 million tons of garbage every year. 50% of the trash is recycled. So what do we do with our garbage? More than half of our cities are exhausting their landfills. Yes, half of it is never right. We could save 150,000 trees every year. We throw away enough office every 5 individuals have some form of lung damage. There are alternatives, clean energy, non-polluting energy. The cost is not so great. The air is.
So I just have just a short piece of the film itself, but it's it was premiered in the 1993, excuse me, film festival, and in Washington D.C. And I'll stop sharing my screen now. I don't know how to do that. Stop sharing. There. Sorry, forgive me. But I think that is the sentiment that I have about it. And I'm looking, David, I think I have 30 seconds left. just do your own thing, enjoy it, have fun with it, set out the words, whether it's poetry or film or writing, realize that it's bigger than these small mind issues that we have. And I hope that you all realize that. As you know, I have been politically involved, but I'm not now, and I have no interest in it, because I think that economics, looking at the economic structures that we have, exceeds political positioning so far. And I agree with James Hughes in that we do need a better social standard where there is equity amongst all people. And I think that's the one aim that we should all strive for, while doing everything we can to pick up the mess that we make in our environment. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Natasha. You have inspired a lot of very interesting comments in the chat. And if we start there, if we start there, we're going to take a long, long time indeed. Comments by Rohit Talwar, James Hughes, Didier Cornell, PNJ, and others. Let's leave that for a discussion in the chat and possibly some of the workshops afterwards. It's incredible imagery there. I've got to try and move on to the next speaker, who is actually Didier Cornell, one of the central players in the French transhumanist movement worldwide, coming to us from the capital of Europe, as he often says. Didier, over to you.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me or not?
Good.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. No, I sometimes say the capital of the world, but this is not serious, of course. Today I will speak about a specific theme. There are many interesting questions, but I will speak about a specific theme: biodiversity, risks and hopes. Okay, and okay. So yeah, transhumanists know that until now, many of the people who were announcing a big environmental risk and a way that we are doomed, they were wrong until now. They were wrong for acid rains. They were wrong for the nuclear risk. They were also wrong concerning the depletion of ozone layer. But okay, it's not because the situation was never really dangerous until now that it's not going to be very dangerous in a not so far future. So for me, concerning the aspect, only the existential risks, let's say only on the environmental side, there are at least 3 categories. So one, I will not speak about this today, is about kind of a snowball effect for global warming, you know, things going really rapidly very bad, and an Earth becoming very quite fast and kind of Venus Earth. There is the second category of unknown cocktail effects of products that are not dangerous by themselves, but they are dangerous when you combine them. And then there is, and maybe it's related to the second aspect, there is the disappearance of biodiversity on an exponential way that we cannot, that we can absolutely not control. So, and this is maybe the case for, especially for the least visible animals, like insects. A few statistics about that. So, in all places, almost all places where there was, they try to see how fast and how bad things are going. There was a constatation that it's really going very bad. So, for example, in German protected areas, since 27 years, people are measuring how much the biomass is of flying insects is disappearing, and it's been in this 27 years about 3/4. So really a lot. About 40% of insect species are threatened with extinction. So in the world. So there are reasons to hope, there are reasons to worry, and there are big doubts. So some reasons to hope. Let's begin with the bright side. Of course, we have an unprecedented awareness of the ecological, the environmental questions. And I would say, so even on the transhumanist side, even if it is not, of course, only today, but more than before. And this is thanks to the fact that we have, among other things, more data than ever. So people who are against, let's say, technological progress, they forget that only the fact that we know what the situation is because we have this technological progress making us able to measure what's happening. It is also only a matter of conscientiously repairing what you have accidentally damaged. So logically, it could be, well, quite easy just to stop something once we know what's happening because of also better technology than ever. But there are also some reasons to be really not optimistic. So the first one is that the diversity of our industrial production with unknown effects on life, I will come back to this, the disappearance of biodiversity before we even realize it, so especially for insects, and so the disappearance of insects also. Okay. And then there are big doubts, many things that we really don't know. And there are two causes for me. The one is the greenwashing and the other is the doomwashing. So now each time that you have new, that you have technological progress, or each time that some people in power want to change something, they will use kind of a, what I will, the word that we could use is greenwashing. They will present things like it is ecologically positive in almost all cases. So even, for example, when there is a new use of coal, they will say, yeah, but no, it's clean coal. We use also less efficient than before. But on the other side, you have kind of a doom washing. So all people opposed, all biologists, they are also very good to present all new technologies and all initiatives as negative. And sometimes they are right, sometimes they are wrong. And it's so systematically there that it's very, very, very difficult to know what's the truth. And then last aspect is all this snowball effect. So José was speaking about inergularity, but yeah, singularity, all these things who are growing on an exponential way. We are at the beginning of it. Also concerning global warming, also concerning other risk, and we are not far away yet to know if it is really an exponential trend or if it is going to stop at some time. So a little bit more about what I read this word insectagadon. I like it. Well, I like the idea. I like the word, not the concept, of course. So like I said already, this decrease of insects is worldwide. It's very strong. It's even in protected areas. And this is the most important thing. As far as I know, and I would love somebody to disagree with me and to say, no, I disagree and I have the cause. As far as I know, there's no clear cause. You all probably know about this example for the people who are old enough here. They remember when we were young and traveling in a car, the windshield was full of dying dead insects after a few hours of riding. And no, it's not that like that. But okay, you could say, well, that's because flying insects are disappearing and they adapt themselves. But when you just go, if you have a dog, you go to with your dog, and the poop of the dog, before it was full of flies. No, it's not anymore. And we know that the flies, they are not especially very fragile animals. So why even the flies are disappearing? It's strange. It's not a lack of specific space like large animals. So yeah, they are there unknowns probably. Also, why is it so, for me, especially worrying? It's because in the past, concerning the insects, well, the famous book of Rachel Carson, it was already almost 60 years ago, Silent Spring. And it was really to make people aware of the risk. Well, some people will say it was exaggerated, but okay, that's another question. The people were really at this time aware of the risk of insecticides and especially DDT. There was a general improvement of the legislations. Well, 60 years ago or 70 years ago, people were even dying because of pollution of the air. Well, massively dying, not after years and years. And we had a lot of new products to replace the old products. But still, this bad evolution that I was saying at the beginning, it's during the last 30 years, about the last 30 years. So when the legislations are globally improving, especially in Europe and in the US. So there are many possible causes. That's one of the, well, the schema there, you see all causes together following one article that it's also quoted. For me, there are, let's say, three main possible explanations, but I don't see them as correct. So really, I want you to put in the chat what's your explanation. So you could say pesticides and other products, but once again, no, they are normally less nocive. You could say loss of natural areas, but once again, it's even in protected areas that you have this problem. You could say that's because of invasive species, but it could explain why you have less diversity, less biodiversity, but not why there is even less biomass. And I'm almost sure people will react here to say that what a joke, but you could say also it's the problem of waves, mobile phones and so on. Well, and well, you could say that also because it's the only thing who was really changing dramatically in some kind of a dangerous way for some people the last 30 years. So what can we do? Well, what we should not do, at least in my opinion, even as a technoprogressist, is to say, yeah, it's not a problem. For example, for pollination, we can replace with robots. I don't think it's a good idea to say to have this kind of thinking. It's not also not enough to ban some substances without testing others. So yeah, of course, we need more measurements in general with the progress concerning DNA and all other ways to have big data. We can progress a lot. In Europe, we have the so-called REACH directive, who make normally obligatory to see if there are negative effects for humans, but also in the nature. But the problem is it's going very slow, very, very slow. And it's only for Europe. Well, and for some countries, I mean also in North America, but it's not going, there are similar laws, but it's not going fast enough in general, and certainly not in poorer countries. So in preparation for the debate, because I don't have the solution really, yeah, the state and companies must invest in research and measures concerning biodiversity. One very important thing for, as the most transhumanists are life extensionists, well, almost all, the right to health of tomorrow and the right to health for the day after tomorrow depends on understanding the risk of biodiversity loss. Why is this happening? And we need better standards. We need international standards for, let's say, trying to stop this evolution. And of course, but this is not only for this question, and I think until now we were not discussing about this. We need more international governance for global questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Didier. You are just in time. It looks like nobody in the group has any answers either as to why the insects are disappearing. I was doing a quick search on Google, and Google doesn't seem to know the answer either. My question for you briefly is, why isn't this getting more attention, given that whatever is killing the insects, if we don't know what it is, might end up killing other things in due course? Why does this rarely get any attention?
Well, because of course a fly is smaller than an elephant, and he's less. In Dutch, there is a nice word, Heights-factor. How could you translate that? It's less sympathetic, you know, less. That's of course one aspect. The second aspect is until now we don't see any, and this is also for me a kind of a mystery. We don't see any bad consequence of this. We just notice that the insects are disappearing, but it has no already visible impact. So really, for me, when I was preparing this, I was, I would say, more worried at the end of my preparation than before, like you say, because I was, of course, Googling around. Okay, and they say, yes, there is a combination of reasons. But if you take all these reasons together and you put the case of German protected areas, you don't understand why is it going why is it going worse now than 30 years ago, where legislation certainly in Germany and certainly, for example, because the East Germany was really not a great place for environment. So why? We don't know.
All right, and as you say, there's two kinds of questions. Why? What is the answer to that question? And why are we not very good at looking for answers to that question at a systematic level? But let's not go there now. Let's hand over to the next speaker. So thank you, Didier. The next speaker is John Danaher, who is from Ireland, and he's going to introduce his talk. Over to you, John.
Okay, thank you, David. And thanks for inviting me to participate in this conference. It's, I think, a rare opportunity for me as an academic that deals in the philosophy and ethics of technology to engage with a group of people who are, I hope, broadly speaking, optimistic about the future. Most of my time is spent looking at reasons why the future is a bad thing and why technology is terrible. So it's nice to look at a set of perspectives that is a little bit more optimistic. So look, in the short time that I have to talk, I just want to try and make an argument that maybe latches onto part of the Veridian Declaration. Specifically, I want to make a plea to think more carefully, systematically, and scientifically about how to harness human and machine intelligence to solve the ecological, sociological, and technological problems that we currently face. All right, so I'll just load up my talk here. Okay, so I'd just probably go a little bit further and say that thinking systematically and scientifically about how to harness human and machine intelligence is the greatest challenge of our times. And I think there are some tentative and fascinating attempts to develop a scientific inquiry into collective intelligence, but they are currently insufficient and we need to do a lot more. So to try and support this argument, I'm going to explore 4 propositions in the remainder of my talk. So the first proposition or claim I want to explore is the notion that in order for our societies to have a bright and sustainable future, we need to invest in our problem-solving capacity. Since on my view, intelligence is equivalent to problem-solving capacity, another way of putting this is to say that we must invest more in our intelligence capital. Now, what's the support for this? Well, I take part of the argument here from Joseph Tainter's famous study of the the collapse of complex societies. So some of you might be familiar with this work. It's popular in the ecological movement. And Tainter's book looks at historical complex societies, you know, all the classic examples, Western Roman Empire, Mayan, the classical Mayan civilization, ancient Egypt. And after reviewing and dismissing the typical explanations for understanding the collapse of these complex societies, which includes, to some extent, the claim that environmental damage and destruction is responsible for their collapse, Tainter concludes that it is insufficient problem-solving capacity that is the root cause of civilizational decline. Now, his argument is relatively simple and consists of 5 main claims, which I'll briefly review. And I apologize for the next slide because some of the text probably going to be quite small on your screen, but I'm happy to share this imagery afterwards. So he starts with the claim, which I just outlined there, is that human societies are essentially problem-solving organizations that generate benefits for their members. That they solve certain existential and psychological problems that their members have. You know, food, clothing, shelter, and also a sense of meaning and purpose in life. In order to sustain themselves in the long run, they must continue to solve problems and generate benefits. Now, like all organizations, human societies must capture and expend energy of some kind in order to sustain their problem-solving capacities. You know, classically, societies have captured energy by foraging, farming, burning fossil fuels, and also to some extent through war and imperial expansion. It's a way of increasing the amount of energy that they can capture and expend to solve problems. So, Tainter's key insight is that in order to sustain themselves in the long run, societies all face a basic cost-benefit equation. The benefits of increased expenditure on problem-solving capacity must exceed the costs in order for a society to be sustainable. Now, roughly speaking, increased investment in problem-solving capacity usually yields higher net benefit returns, but this typically comes at an increasing per capita or per unit cost for these benefits. So that, the marginal returns on increased investment starts to decline at some point in time. And if the marginal costs of investing in problem-solving capacity start to exceed the marginal benefits at an increasing rate, you get societal collapse. There's going to be a rapid and significant decline in socio-political complexity, and this is a bad thing if you care about the sustenance of civilization in the long run. And the only way that societies really avoid this dilemma, apart from by collapsing and fragmenting or ending up in some state of civil war or strife, is if they can develop some kind of breakthrough technology that either reduces the costs involved in problem solving or increases the benefit or net returns in problem solving capacity. So historically, classic examples of such innovative breakthroughs include breakthroughs in methods of food production. You could argue the facilitation of open markets and trading is another kind of innovative breakthrough that facilitates increased benefits and reduced costs, new techniques of management, new forms of energy production, most recently then computing power. But what I would argue is that each of these technological breakthroughs is ultimately made possible by intelligence. And hence it is our intelligence capital, not technology per se, that should be the main target for investment if we are to sustain our civilization in the long run. That leads me then to my second proposition claim, which is that the most effective forms of intelligence are collective in nature, not individualistic. In other words, we should focus primarily on making teams of humans and machines enhance their collective intelligence, and not solely on making individuals more intelligent. Now look, we all like to celebrate lone geniuses like Einstein, Newton, Darwin, but the reality is that lone geniuses play a limited role in the sustainability and success of human civilizations in the long run. It is rather collections of individuals coordinating and cooperating their intelligence that make civilization possible. Now look, there's a certain amount of common sense behind this argument or claim. You just look around and consider how dependent you are in your daily interactions with other people and their capacity for problem solving to solve your basic existential problems. But there are some books that have defended this idea that it is collective intelligence that is responsible for the success of human civilization in much more detail. So one of my favorite books in this regard is Joseph Heinrich's The Secret of Our Success, which presents a good body of evidence for thinking that it is collective intelligence and not individual intelligence that is responsible for the success of human civilization. And there are many examples of this in the book, but he uses an interesting thought experiment to set up his main thesis that collective intelligence is what matters, which is a comparison between a human and a chimpanzee. And he asks the question of what would happen if you dropped a chimpanzee and a human into the middle of the jungle, who would survive longest? Who would you bet on surviving, more than a few days? And Heinrich says you bet on the chimpanzee every time. Why is this? Well, Heinrich's claim is that because individual humans aren't really capable of doing much by themselves, they depend highly on their cultures, their collaborators, and their technologies to get by. Now, technologies play a crucial role in human collective intelligence structures, or group minds, as you might call them. Humans are, after all, a technological species, and one of the main products of our intelligence is technology. From stone axes to nuclear reactors, groups of humans create and use technologies that enhance our collective intelligence. Now, artificial intelligence is one of the most recent manifestations of human collective intelligence. And some people worry that it's going to replace or undermine human beings. And some of these fears might be well-founded, less so, but it's not a debate that I want to get into right now. But what I will say is that we shouldn't think of, the best way to think about AI is not as something that's separate from or alien from human collective intelligence. Ideally, what you want to happen is to view AI as a partner or assistance to human intelligence, and as something that needs to be incorporated effectively into our collective intelligence structures. And indeed, incorporating AI into our collective intelligence structures may be the technological breakthrough that we need to avoid Tainter's dilemma about this decline in marginal return on investment. This brings me then to my third proposition, is that I think we can think systematically and scientifically about collective intelligence structures and how best to design them and maximize their benefits relative to their costs. So we know totally and historically that some groups are more successful than others. And we also know that there are many different designs on group structures that we could implement. And we are now starting to develop a scientific field of inquiry into collective intelligence. And this is the main argument that I'm trying to make here, is that I think it's important that we double down on this scientific inquiry if we are going to survive and thrive in the future. The work of Thomas Malone and his colleagues springs to mind here. They've developed some insightful and innovative methods for understanding group intelligence. They've developed this notion of a group intelligence test, which is similar to an IQ test. In initial experiments on the idea, they find that you can seem to measure collective intelligence. Now, there are some factors that seem to correlate with more intelligent groups. There's no causal links per se yet. Some of the factors that seem to correlate with increased group intelligence include cognitive diversity within the group, not all kinds of diversities, but cognitive diversity specifically, social perceptiveness within the group, how empathetic and understanding the members of the group are, quality of participation within the group. And also one of the findings that they have from their studies is that groups with more women tend to be better than more intelligent than groups with fewer women. And it's not just that it's equal proportions that are better. Their findings seem to suggest that more women are generally better as groups. There's an explanation for why this might be, which is that women tend to be more socially perceptive on average than men. But Thomas Malone would caution that you shouldn't overinterpret the data from their studies so far. There's a lot of noise in them, and these are just kind of tentative studies, but I think they're indicative of the kind of thing that we should start doing. I mean, the one thing I will say is that the correlation between cognitive diversity and group intelligence seems to be fairly robust, and there are some independent reasons for thinking that it would be indicative of increased collective intelligence. All right. The other thing as well is that we can think about the different types of collective intelligence structure and their distinctive costs and benefits. Now, in principle, there are many different group structures as there are groups, but one of the things that Malone argues in his work is that there are 5 basic types of collective intelligence structure, and they each have their own distinctive costs and benefits. So the 5 are, there are hierarchies in which you get one individual or small group that solves problems for a larger group, often supported by some kind of legal bureaucratic agency or set of agencies. You have democracies, David is going to talk about this next, in which you have all members who have a say in how problems are solved through some kind of formal voting procedure. You have markets in which people are left largely to themselves, but they then transact and trade each other, and kind of group problem solving emerges as an emergent property of these individual transactions. Markets usually depend for their success on some background hierarchy and democracy, by the way. They usually can't function perfectly independently of these things. You then have communities where there's no real formal mechanism for group coordination, but there's instead a reliance on informal social norms, and the group solves problems by coordinating on these norms. And then kind of a default category, Malone says there's an ecosystem, which is, there's no structure at all. It's kind of like a Hobbesian state of nature where the powerful solve group problems. Right, so Malone argues that each of these structures has different costs and benefits for the members of the groups, and there's different ways of distributing the benefits to the members of the groups. So hierarchies often produce significant group benefits, but they tend not to distribute those benefits very widely, okay? They also tend to be quite costly to maintain. You need to create cultural myths, religions, laws, enforcement agencies to maintain the hierarchy. Democracies are somewhat similar. They produce significant group benefits, but they're also costly to maintain. And they do usually distribute group benefits more evenly. Markets and communities are different again. They produce group benefits at a lower cost because there's no formal infrastructure for maintaining the group, say. But they're more unpredictable in how much benefit they generate and how they distribute those benefits. And technology plays a key role in maximizing the benefits of each type of group, both by reducing the costs of group coordination and decision-making, and also increasing the net benefit or return to the group. So, I mean, Malone's framework is just a preliminary one, but I think it's a useful example of how we might start to think carefully, systematically, and scientifically about collective intelligence. And that brings me to my last proposition or claim, which is that I think we should be pluralists, not monists, when it comes to investment in and design of collective intelligence structures. So look, I think it's tempting to think that we need to find the best type of group structure, or that one structure is necessarily better than the others. You know, the claim that democracy for all its ills is better than all the rest. But I think we should avoid this temptation. You know, the reality is that modern societies blend different kinds of collective intelligence structure. I mean, to stick with the framework I just outlined there, even in liberal democratic states, it's not the case that we rely only on democratic mechanisms or group structures. Our democratic political institutions include elements of hierarchy, legal bureaucratic hierarchy, and they may well depend on informal community norms to be sustained in the long run. And these democratic institutions themselves often support and sustain markets. Another important point here is that the kinds of structures that we use can often decay or stagnate over time. They may cease to function as effective problem-solving mechanisms. We may need to adapt and redesign them when this happens. And many people argue that this is actually now happening to mature democratic states, because a democracy's primary tools for increasing its problem-solving capacity and its perceived legitimacy to the group is to enlarge the voting franchise and increase transparency and accountability. But there's several theorists in the last few years that have argued that mature democracies may have hit the point of declining marginal returns when it comes to these mechanisms. So there's a real challenge here as to how we can redesign democracies and reinvigorate their problem-solving capacity. And I believe David is going to talk about this next, right? But my bottom line is this: there are different kinds of structure that are optimal for different kinds of problem, and figuring out which structure is optimal for the set of challenges that we now face, be they ecological, sociological, or technological, or political, is something that is a project that we should focus on and invest in. I think we've started to take steps in this direction, but we need to do a lot more than we're currently doing. So that's the end of my talk.
Thank you so much, John. Mark Rue is going to take over the moderator role now. I'll just note that I echo your praise for Thomas Malone's book, Supermind. I found it fascinating for exactly the same reasons you've picked out. And I want to thank you for highlighting the book by Joseph Henrich, The Secret of Our Success. I think I'll be adding that to my list as well. Mark, do you want to take over?
Yes, I have the pleasure to introduce the next and last speaker, David. Just a reminder before to leave you the floor. You remember that after David will have speak, we will have about 1 hour to try to work in the workshop on the Veridian Manifesto. And so we are still asking you, and you can start to indicate in the chat room the workshop you would prefer to work on. I remember that the possibilities, well, just we are now something like 23 people. I think we will not have 4 but 3 workshop. The first one will be social and institution, the second one energy, and the third one ecosystem and health. So please indicate your preferences by those possibilities. And now, thank you, David, for your presentation.
Thank you so much. So as you heard, my name's David Wood, and my topic is going to be super democracy as the key enabler of the Viridian future that some of us have been talking about. And I'll be cutting some corners in my talk, but you can find me afterwards if you don't know me already. Google David Wood Futurists, or on Twitter, I am at DW2. Start by looking at the last 250 years or so. And I will argue that at a broad level, that period of time has seen generally increasing human flourishing. People's lives have been longer on the whole and healthier. There has been more education, more human rights, more travel, more consumer items. At the same time, the technology has given us not just this greater flourishing, it has given us greater potential for damage, accidental damage, or intentional damage. But we're here to look not at the past, we're here to look at what might happen in the next few decades. If I look ahead to roughly the middle of the century and look at some key scenarios that might lie ahead, most people, if they don't think about things very much, tend to assume that history will more or less continue. Of course, some things will change, but by and large, it will be an extension, business as usual. There might be some acceleration, or there might be a slowdown. For example, average life expectancy might decrease due to greater deaths of depression, and so on. But I'm here to say that I don't think any of that range of scenarios is very likely. I rate it collectively as only about 10% chance. And what is much more likely is something that John mentioned, which is that due to the increasing factors that are at loose, we might tip downwards with some kind of social collapse, an environmental tragedy, a humanitarian catastrophe. Why? Because the powers that will be put in our hands, mixed with our existing human nature at the individual and social structures, can do a great deal of harm. And I rate that at least 1/3 likely. If you add up the numbers, you'll see there's still around a 55% chance of something different, something significantly different, which is what I tend to think is most likely to happen, which is that we can take advantage of the nanotech, biotech, green tech, infotech, and cognitech to reach something which previous generations would almost call a kind of paradise, a sustainable abundance or sustainable superabundance for all. But that's by no means certain. And the task of all of us as futurists, transhumanists, or whatever, is to figure out how to decrease the probability of that very bad scenario and increase the probability of this wonderful scenario. And broadly, there are 3 steps involved. We have to understand what might cause the collapse, the forces that are loose that are causing fear, outrage, collective stupidity, and so forth. But more than just dealing with these negative forces, much more important is to paint more clearly a vivid, positive vision of a techno-progressive transformation in which no one is left behind against their will. And to help with this is a matter of spelling out the most important values, as we have to take lots of hard decisions in the years ahead about priorities. What are the things that matters most? And we need to clarify that as never before. And I claim this is what we might call a transhumanist values. And although this is a transhumanist conference, there hasn't been much said about transhumanism so far. So I'm going to take this opportunity of saying that the most important insight of transhumanism, in my view, is that human nature needs to be improved. Now, many people don't like that idea. They say that human nature is precious and should not be tampered with. And although we have foibles and eccentricities and foolishness, that's all part of the package. And if we were to try and change this, bad things will inevitably happen. Some people say that our human nature is divinely created. Others will say it comes from a long, difficult, complicated process of evolution, which ultimately is wise. But transhumanism disagrees. Transhumanists say it is careless, reckless, blasé, just to leave our human nature as it is when we have all these very powerful technologies increasingly at our disposal. So we transhumanists see human nature as a mix of features, some of which should be preserved, some of which should be improved and enhanced, and others which should be restricted or limited, or we might say transcended. And some people say, well, in principle, we're probably right, but they hate the idea of people taking these decisions on others' behalf. And we transhumanists say we're not in the business of making these decisions ourselves. We want to encourage what we might call the best of humanity 1.0 to come together and collaboratively figure out how we can get to what Humanity Plus, the organization, call a Humanity Plus future. And that involves assembling the best insights of all kinds of scientists, but also the insights from multiple different cultures, enhancing that with creative imagination, and then critically evaluating it by the collective wisdom of Humanity 1.0. And that's difficult and that's challenging. But if we run away from that challenge, we are very likely to end up in the collapse scenario, which I highlighted. So stage by stage, we can address these issues. And if that sounds a bit abstract, let me try and make it a bit more concrete. Transhumanists sometimes talk about 3 supers, or sometimes about 4 supers. And in each case, there are ways in which we will transcend some of the bad aspects of human nature that we have inherited, either from evolution or from our culture and sociology, or from the philosophical ideas that are lying around. So the 4 supers: super longevity, super intelligence. Some transhumanists talk about super happiness, more of us should, and a few transhumanists, and a lot more should, also talk about super democracy. Super longevity means overcoming the inherited nature in our biological bodies to decay and become decrepit. We can overcome these by wisely using rejuvenation biotechnology. Super intelligence refers to the fact that we have lots of drawbacks in our thinking, cognitive biases, blind spots, collective stupidity, we might say. And much of that made sort of sense in ancient Neolithic times. There were rules of the thumb that helped us to get by, but they are very dangerous now, and we must augment that with artificial intelligence and technologies for collective intelligence. Our emotional selves are planted by evolution, not to make us happy. Evolution was not interested in making us happy particularly. It was just interested in us doing what was necessary to propagate our genes. And we therefore have lots of tendencies towards egotism, depression, alienation, and so forth, which we can address in multiple ways, but in part by taking advantage of transformative technologies of cognotech. Which takes me to super democracy. It takes us to recognizing that many aspects of our human nature are built out in social relationships. And we do tend, for evolutionary reasons, to fear different people. It sort of made sense historically. We have tendencies to divisiveness, tendencies to deceive other people. One of the reasons our brains got so large, people think, is because we needed to keep track of who was deceiving who and who knew who was deceiving whom. And that's not very flattering, but it's at least part of the reasons why our brains grew. And we are also very prone, once we've got power, to abuse it. Well, we can address this too, enhancing diversity, very importantly, as John Danaher was just talking about. This is not just about doing one thing and doing one thing again and again. Enhancing our liberty, protecting social inclusion and resilience. And I'm going to say a bit more about that. But first, actually, there are 5 dimensions, in my view, of what transhumanism is about. And I will add it to the rejuvenation of our body, the rejuvenation of our minds, the rejuvenation of our emotional selves, and the rejuvenation of our political structures. I will add the rejuvenation of human vision, something that will avoid us from being bogged down in small-mindedness, in pettiness, in tribal visions. And this is the transhumanist techno-progressive vision of a sustainable superabundance ahead, if we are wise enough to see it and grasp the opportunity. And I believe that what will help a lot of humanity get out of its present state of dysfunction is sharing this credible, inspiring, engaging, and inclusive vision. So I talk about super narrative as well. And part of that narrative is to think about the future of politics. And I'll start with this statement, which isn't a definition of super democracy. It is a famous definition of democracy from, amongst other places, Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. And let's just dive into this a bit and then see how transhumanism will enhance it. There are 3 clauses. There is the government of the people. Government means that people are actually organized and have some restrictions put on them, on us. We can't always decide by ourselves what we want to do. We can't decide by ourselves. This wasn't Lincoln's analogy, but we can say it now. We can't decide by ourselves how much we can drink before we drive. We can't decide, each of us by ourselves, how fast we can drive a car, where we can take dangerous items such as firearms, nor should we be able to decide entirely by ourselves what pollutants we emit. Government of the people, by the people. By the people means representatives of the people. Some of them are there in professional capacity, like the civil service and the judges, but the most important ones are elected and vital, are subject to removal in elections. And when this works well, the elected representatives take advice from the entire population, not just the loudest voices, and get advice not just at the times of elections. The 3rd clause, democracy for the people, for all the people. It's not just for an elite, a 1% or so. It's not just for any special complexes that follow their human nature and try to grab onto power and privilege. So presidents have warned us against the military-industrial complex. We are warned against big pharma, big agrotech, big oil, big media tech as well. We are warned against allowing too much power for the press barons, and certainly we have to watch out for politics being operated just in service of the politicians. So that is what I think Lincoln and others had in mind. And the big issue with democracy, of course, is it puts a very heavy reliance on people. And you may have heard this argument against democracy. It's a 5-minute conversation with the average voter, which is sometimes said to be a quote from Churchill, though Churchill's foundation denies that he ever said such a thing. Nevertheless, we can well imagine it, and we are sometimes horrified at what our fellow average voters express. And for democracy to flourish and to fulfill its mission, we need people to be autonomous, not to be easily misled by all these complexes, the big pharma, the military, the press, who will guide us, lead us astray. We need people to have a basic education in critical thinking and historical examples, and indeed in foresight. And we need people to be better supported. Is that enough? So some transhumanists give the impression that we will have better politics because we will have, in due course, people who are better politicians, better voters, better press, better analysts, and so on. But I'm here to say that is not enough. And we have to modify this. It is government of the people. This is just the first of several modifications of this statement. By the people, aided by technology, and aided by institutions. And it's for the people. Aided by technology means that we will use technology to do things like real-time fact-checking, real-time logic checking, source checking, to highlight more clearly and more quickly when politicians and others are making fake claims. The AI should also help to synthesize different views. It's not just being critical, it's offering compromises. And it's also allowing simulations of possible policies to be run so we can see more clearly ahead of times what is likely to be happening. But even that is not the culmination. I want to highlight in my last minute or so the two most vital inventions, in my view, in some ways, from the last 250 years. They are the vital invention of the mixed economy and the vital invention of separation of powers. The mixed economy means we realize that the free market can do wonders. It can allow lots of innovation to take place. We don't tell people who they should work for. We don't fix the prices centrally. But we do recognize that the free market moves into failure modes from time to time, left under its own steam, and we therefore need to steer it. That is the free market governed by democracy. And it involves not just innovation in products, it also requires innovation in regulations. Today's regulatory systems and subsidy systems and externalities are not well managed, and we need to hurry up and improve how that works. We need to apply innovations in management to the management of politics. We need better industrial strategy, and the freedom of the press must be subject to the same kind of constraints that we have for freedom of advertising, which is that advertisers who knowingly lie should be subject to penalties. And if I had more time, I could talk about using some of these technologies to enhance new institutions such as citizens' assemblies, liquid voting, reputation systems, and so forth. So briefly, transhumanism, it's a vision of, yes, a better world with better humans, but also structured in new ways, not dramatically different ways, evolving where we are today, going back to this vision of separation of power and the mixed economy and making it work with the best of new technology. And that will improve our environment too. And transhumanism isn't just an abstract vision. It is a set of policies, ideally to develop technologies, but also to develop these institutions, to steer politics, and very importantly, to spread insight via education, such as the very important Humanity Plus initiative, Transhumanist Studies, which is now gathering pace. It's a community and it's an ethical framework that will help us take these hard decisions. I've cut a lot of corners in my rushed 16 minutes, but you can find more details from my books, and I will now hand back to Mark. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. Indeed, I think we are a little late, so I think that if there are questions for David, it could be better to answer or during the workshop, if not impossible, or in the chat room. Just now, before to switch to the chat rooms, I have to add the links to the different parts of the Veridian Manifesto, because we are inviting you to concentrate on different parts of these texts, depending on the workshop you choose. So this is the text for the first one, and I think Didier, you can start to make the
yes
division.
Yes, so just a few technical aspects. So normally you will now see the choice. So normally try to choose if you are able. If you are not able, I will put you in the place that you choose, except if there are too many people in one room. For the moment, for information, room 1 is already quite full. So please choose other ones. Okay, that's so you see it normally from now. And the next point is this conversation will be for about 50 minutes, and then we will join again for, let's say, a brief debriefing and people presenting what was said in their group. So please now choose and tell me if you are not. So first, maybe tell me if there is somebody seeing that the choose. Unmute yourself to confirm. Nobody. Normally, you should see it. Okay, I see at least that Natasha already
it's
changed.
Working,
So,
Didier.
yeah. So Natasha was the fastest. Okay. James are the 1 and 2 now combined. So the one, oh sorry, I'm lost. It was, say it again, Mark, one is?
So
one, James is already gone.
It's about social and institutional issues.
Okay.
For people who are still in the main room, I give the access to each of the docs, so you just have to ask.
Okay. Florent, I put in the one, I know.
Yeah.
Okay, just tell me, I will ask, tell me loud with the sound where you want to go. It's the easiest way for me because there are too many messages. So Alexander, which one? Don't forget to unmute yourself. So Alexander, well, energy, I suppose. So I send you to energy. You will be with me. That's the bad news for you. Joking. Brian. Cyril. David. David, I suppose that you were...
I may come to energy with you, since I'm talking a lot about energy these days.
Yes, great. Okay. So we still have Cyril, Jenny, John, Marion, and Vivien.
You can put me in the number 1, Didier.
Marion,
le premier, please. Thanks.
Okay. It's Marion, who was speaking or not? Sorry.
Yes, it was me.
Okay.
Merci.
Okay, so Cyril, Jenny, John, Marc, and Vivien, but one has at least to one at least or two should choose the room 3.
I had asked to join group 1 already. Sorry.
John, okay, sorry, John. Okay, it's room 1. Okay, so Marc, I send you to the 3.
Yeah. Okay. I don't. We will be. Who will be the organizer, the animator for the group 1?
Good question. Nell is asking help. I don't know. I don't know. We will see.
I go to the 3.
Okay, Nell is asking, wait, just a minute. Mark, I send you to, what did I say, room 3. Yeah? Normally after that you can change, I hope. Vivien, if you don't object, I send you in the room 3 also. Vivien, 1, 2, 3. I send you to the 3. Jenny, I send, okay. Cyril, well, Cyril, I send you to the 3 also if you don't object. 1, 2, okay, voilà. stopping your meeting, so I stopped for everybody. So everybody should be back here. For my group, Peter will make kind of a small summary of what we were saying, and is there, yeah, people will come back, but not all of them probably. Okay, I don't know. Oh.
Is there another group that's still active?
I think that James and yeah, they were resisting until the last second, probably. Yes, yeah. Yes. Okay. So now it's time for restitution. I propose that each group is speaking a maximum of 150 seconds. And I will, who wants to begin? If nobody wants to begin, it will be for Peter. Otherwise, or maybe Mark. Mark, the 150 seconds.
Yes, yes, I will be short for this part. But I will want to add what we was saying yesterday. I don't know if everybody hear it, the fact that the docs will be open at least until the end of the week. So if people want to go and complete, it will be possible. I will precise such things and ask for feedback, not now, but if people can send us feedback of this little exercise that I want to say. You're mute, Didier.
Yeah, yes, but maybe also kind of a short summary of your group. You know?
Yes, but I will be short.
Okay,
yes,
go ahead.
Is everybody did come back?
Yes, except the people who...
Sorry.
Yeah. Sorry, yes.
Okay, sorry. So in the third group, this time we worked almost paragraph by paragraph. And so we had different details on the different paragraph. It was maybe easier because we was only 4 pupils. So all the pupils was working about at the same time on the same paragraph. And maybe I was just point the last part, the fact that we proposed 5.9 last paragraph. We wasn't at all on this text, adding the fact that the idea that as the Earth is the cradle of humanity, as we have said. You know the sentence of Konstantin Tsiolkovsky. We have to not work on the possibility to search somewhere else solutions, but for the while it's not just possibility like that, but further than that, the idea that we have to protect our own planet as a really precious and lovely things. And then the idea that as we are increasingly in connected world, we have to take more care about the systemic risk. That's the second point that was added pretty simply. So I'm stopping for this part, and I don't know, maybe everybody hear me when I was speaking about the ask for feedback. And
yeah, it's working. Yes.
So I haven't to repeat it.
Thank you. Nell, you wanted to ask to add something, or did I thought you were asking? No, sorry. No, sorry. So now I give 2 minutes for Peter, who was in the group concerning energy. Please, Peter.
Yes, okay. We didn't edit the actual document because, well, we just didn't. But there are comments that we made. And the chief among them, I think, was that there is there's a worry that the need to address the energy problem and indeed other environmental problems is much more urgent than this document might lead you to believe. So, and that's because we have a rapidly diminishing carbon budget and our emissions are still rising, and we're skeptical that carbon capture and storage will be ready within the timescale that it would be actually needed. The other thing we noted was that the document is light on citations, and for it to be a credible manifesto for general consumption, it needs to back up whatever assertions it makes by having good references. And also something about the kind of physics and the numbers involved probably should be better illustrated so that people get a better idea of the scales that are being talked about and what's actually practical and what isn't. It needs to be made clearer than the text, which is currently somewhat vague in terms of the numbers involved. There was a bit of discussion about how, in general, the population is not particularly sort of scientifically well educated and numerate, and that is something else that may need to be addressed. But I think I may have run out of time.
Yeah. No, if you want to continue a few seconds, it's okay. It's okay.
No, I've said enough.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Peter. And yes, globally, personally, I agree with what was said during this meeting, and especially the fact that we should have more, let's say, information, more quotes and so on. This document is only a first document, and it was already a lot of work, but it can be improved a lot for this aspect. And now I give the word to, I suppose, Florentin, but I suppose also that there were quite interesting discussion in this group. So if some, after Florentin, if some other people want to add something, but a maximum of a few seconds, please do it.
As I said to Natasha, I'm not very at ease in English speaking. So if James or Natasha could give feedback, it could be better, I think. Sorry.
We had a spirited discussion. I think the principal concern for me was that the document, while it, as a whole, while it expresses our shared techno enthusiasms, it does not give an answer to the cause of the ecological crisis, the things that are preventing us from achieving ecological sustainability, the kind of political vision, how it connects to the existing political debates about how we move forward. I think Natasha has a more optimistic perspective. And I think between the two of us, we represent the dilemma of transhumanists trying to relate to these kind of questions, is that we don't agree about politics. And because we don't, the only thing that we can throw out is a series of technological enthusiasms. That, I think, is a weakness. It won't allow this document to be taken seriously in ecological circles.
Natasha, probably you want to add something, because, but don't forget to unmute yourself.
Thank you, so sorry. I agree with James in part, but on whole. I think that there's a diverse range of political views and ideologies and economic understandings amongst transhumanists because we're a diverse culture across many countries and hold different views. However, the fundamental view is not that we all support technologies, that we all support life. And technology is just a tool. It's not God to me, and it's not the end all to be all. It's a tool to help us live better, healthier lives. And part of that is the environment. So one of the issues we discussed is not making everything anti this, but look for solutions here. And I think John brought some real strong balance to that discussion. And I think we need to point out to understand where we stand, we need to take a look at what's working and what's not working. So I put some things in the chat over here where we think of global warming and climate change and et cetera, and the temperature of the oceans and the rise of this and the lowering of that. And the climate has been shifting since its existence. And we don't know who's caused this recent problem, but we do know it's probably industrialization that did. So if we look at what are the 5 largest areas of damaging cancers to the earth, I put them here. You can see 5 going down to 1 being the oil industry. So that needs to be curbed. I'm all for regulations on this. For these 5 areas, I think we need more staunch regulations on how much pollution these particular 5 strongest pollutants in the world, what they're doing, who runs them, who owns them, and to make policies for them to cut the crap, basically. Then I think we also need to take a look at the countries that are doing the best in climate change and pollution. That's Portugal, Finland, et cetera here, and then the worst, and find out what the differences are. And then take this into a discussion that John put here, that to invest in the scientific study and design of collective intelligence, not to look at politics per se, but look at what is the collective intelligence of our various fields. And then it gets out of the realm of being one combative political view against another combative political view, but intellectuals who are contributing information so that we can assess this without you know, our religious or political views.
Okay, thank you, Natasha. I think that this is the end of this Viridian conference, but it is not the end of the, let's say, improvement of the document that was shown. Normally in only a few days or maximum 1 or 2 weeks, this conference will be online, at least the interventions of the speakers. Also, before stopping, I want to thank again the people who were making this possible. So David, Mark, but also Marion and Virginie, who were making it possible for technical aspects and for, let's say, also some political aspects. And if nobody has something to add, so thank you again, goodbye, and do not, you are once again invited to make some more comments in all documents. So I stop here the